The galaxy was dying, one world at a time. Admiral Cairo stood before the massive holographic display in the Coalition's emergency war room on Kepler Prime. The blue lights from 17 dead star systems blinked slowly, like dying heartbeats. Each light represented billions of lives lost to the Vorthok Dominion's endless hunger for conquest. "Show me their latest formation," Cairo commanded, his forearms crossed behind his back. The display shifted, revealing the terrifying sight of Vorthok war fleets. Each ship was the size of a small moon, covered in weapons that could turn planets into dust. They moved through space like a plague of metal locusts, consuming everything in their path. Around the circular chamber, representatives from dozens of species sat in grim silence. The Altrurians, with their tall, graceful forms. The rock-like, granite people who rarely spoke above a whisper. Energy beings from the nebula worlds who flickered with nervous light. All of them shared the same look of desperate fear, Dr. Vela. The Coalition's top scientist approached the center of the room. Her tentacles moved nervously as she prepared to speak. For months, she had been working on something in secret. Something that might save them all, or damn them forever. "Friends," she began, her voice echoing through the chamber's translation systems. "We have tried everything. Our best weapons bounce off their shields. Our strongest ships are destroyed in minutes. Our greatest minds cannot find a way to stop them." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. They had all seen the reports. The Vorthok were not just stronger, they were perfect killing machines. Evolution had spent millions of years creating the ultimate predators, and now those predators were loose in the galaxy. "But I have found something," Dr. Vela continued. "In the ruins of Ketha Prime, before the Vorthok burned it to ash, our archaeologists discovered an ancient archive. Inside were the genetic records of a species unlike any we have ever seen." The holographic display changed, showing DNA patterns and evolutionary charts. The data looked chaotic, almost random, but Dr. Vela knew better. This species destroyed itself over and over again, yet somehow survived each time. They fought wars that should have ended them. They faced disasters that killed entire worlds. But they kept living, kept growing stronger. Admiral Cairo leaned forward. "What made them so special?" "They turned everything into a weapon," Dr. Vela replied. "Rocks, sticks, fire, water, even their own bodies. But more than that, they had something we don't understand. When one of them was threatened, the others would fight to the death to protect them. Not just their own kind, anyone they decided to care about." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "They called themselves humans." The chamber erupted in confused voices. Several representatives demanded to know why they were discussing an extinct species when the Vorthok were burning their way across the galaxy. Others wanted to know how old genetic data could possibly help them. Dr. Vela raised her tentacles. "For silence, because they're not really extinct. Their genetic code is complete. We can rebuild them." The room fell deadly quiet. "You want to create a new species?" Admiral Cairo asked slowly. "Not create, recreate. But faster, better, focused on one single purpose, stopping the Vorthok." The proposal was insane. Had never attempted to build an entire species from scratch. It would take decades, maybe centuries. They would need to guide every step of development, teach them to fight, help them grow strong enough to face an enemy that had conquered most of the known galaxy. "How long would this take?" asked Representative Cora from the Crystal Worlds. 50 years minimum, maybe more." "We don't have 50 years," Admiral Cairo said grimly. "The Vorthok will reach our core worlds in 10. Then we accelerate everything. Force their evolution, compress millions of years into decades. It's dangerous, but it might work." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some called it impossible. Others said it was morally wrong to create a species just to fight their wars. A few suggested it was their only hope. In the end, fear won over ethics. The vote was close, but it passed. Project Prometheus was approved. Deep in a hidden star system, the Coalition would build a world. On that world, they would grow humans from genetic templates. They would guide them, teach them, shaped them into the ultimate weapons. As the meeting ended and representatives filed out, Dr. Vela remained behind, staring at the human genetic data floating in the holographic display. The patterns were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. These humans had been warriors, survivors, protectors. They had turned war into an art form. Now the Coalition would bring them back to save the galaxy. Dr. Vela just hoped they could control what they were about. To unleash outside the chamber windows, the stars continued to shine. But everyone knew that soon some of those lights would go dark forever unless their desperate gambit succeeded. Somewhere in those archives was the key to victory. They just had to build it first. The hidden planet looked peaceful from space. Green forests covered most of the land, with blue oceans and white clouds swirling around it. But Dr. Vela knew better. This world was a weapon factory. Now the weapons were alive. 43 years had passed since Project Prometheus began. In the underground laboratories, Coalition scientists had worked day and night to build humanity from scratch. They started with genetic codes stored in ancient computers, mixing and changing them to create the perfect warriors. The first humans were simple. They lived in caves, used stone tools, and fought with their bare hands. But even then, Dr. Vela noticed something strange. When one human was hurt, the others would risk their lives to save them. This was not programmed into their genes, it just happened naturally. "Fascinating," she whispered, watching through invisible cameras as a group of humans fought off wild animals to save an injured child. They protect each other without being taught. The Coalition scientists decided to speed things up. They created disasters to make the humans stronger. Earthquakes, floods, attacks from dangerous animals. Each time, the humans found ways to survive that no one expected. When earthquakes destroyed their caves, they built stronger shelters. When floods came, they learned to make boats. When predators attacked, they worked together to fight back. They turned everything around them into tools and weapons. Dr. Vela watched a human named Kong discover fire. Within days, his tribe was using fire to cook food, scare away animals, and forge better weapons. Another human called Rena figured out how to make poison from plants. Soon her people were coating their spears with deadly toxins. They learned so fast, Dr. Vela told her assistant. Much faster than the original species, but speed was not enough. The Vorthok were still coming, destroying more Coalition worlds every year. The scientists decided to push harder. They created wars between human tribes, forcing them to develop new fighting techniques. The results were incredible. Humans began using tactics that made no sense, but somehow worked. They would pretend to retreat, then attack from unexpected directions. They dug tunnels under enemy camps. They used the weather, the land, even the stars, to help them win battles. 1. A human leader named June created a strategy that impressed even the alien observers. His small tribe was surrounded by enemies, outnumbered 10-1. Instead of fighting, he convinced the other tribes that a bigger threat was coming. He made them all work together to face this fake danger. By the time they realized the trick, June's people had learned all their secrets and become too strong to defeat. "Brilliant," Admiral Cairo said, watching the recordings. "They think in ways we never considered." As centuries passed in the accelerated timeline, human civilizations grew more complex. They built cities, developed technologies, and created art, but they never stopped being warriors. Every human child learned to fight from an early age. Every tool they made could become a weapon. Dr. Vela noticed something else the humans had. Started looking up at the sky more often. They built strange structures that seemed to point toward the stars. Some even tried to signal into space. "Do you think they know we're watching?" her assistant asked. "I think they've always known," Dr. Vela replied. The proof came during what the humans called their Renaissance period. A human scientist named Minho built a device that could detect the Coalition's observation drones. Instead of panicking, he simply looked directly into the camera and smiled. That night, humans all over the planet began building new devices. They were trying to communicate with their watchers. Dr. Vela realized with growing unease that the humans weren't just aware of being observed. They were studying their observers right back. The situation became critical when the Vorthok destroyed the Centauri colonies. 3 billion lives lost in a single day. The coalition leaders demanded that Project Prometheus be accelerated even more. "We need them ready now," Admiral Cairo commanded. "Ready or not," Dr. Vela protested. "They need more time. They're still developing. Time we don't have." As coalition transport ships approached the hidden world, Dr. Vela made a shocking discovery. The humans had been preparing for this moment for generations. They had built weapons using salvaged parts from the observation drones. They had figured out how to reverse engineer alien technology. When the first transport ship landed, it was met by a human delegation led by a woman named Hannah. She was young, maybe 25 in human years, but her eyes held the wisdom of someone much older. "Welcome," she said in perfect coalition standard language. "We've been waiting for you." Dr. Vela stared at the translation readout. "How do you know our language?" Hannah smiled. "We've been listening to your communications for decades. We know about the Vorthok. We know why you made us." Behind her stood thousands of human warriors, each carrying weapons that blended ancient human designs with advanced alien technology. They looked ready for war. "We have a few questions before we help you," Hannah continued. "But first, we want to meet the people we're fighting to protect." Dr. Vela realized that their weapon had become something they never expected. The humans weren't just tools anymore. They were partners. They had their own plans for this war. Captain June pressed his hand against the cold metal wall of the alien transport ship. Through the transparent viewing port, stars rushed past like silver tears. He had dreamed of this moment since childhood's the day the Skywatchers would finally show themselves. Now they had. And the truth was exactly what the elders had whispered around campfires for generations. "You are weapons," Dr. Vela said, her tentacles moving nervously as she spoke. "Created to fight an enemy we cannot defeat ourselves." June turned to face the alien scientist. Behind her stood Admiral Cairo, his forearms crossed, watching the human captain with careful eyes. Other coalition representatives filled the briefing room, strange beings from across the galaxy, all united by fear. "We know," June said simply. The aliens looked surprised. Dr. Vela's tentacles stopped moving. "You know, our ancestors figured it out centuries ago. The disasters that came too regularly. The way you guided our wars. The strange lights in the sky that watched but never helped." June walked to the center of the room. "We've been preparing for this conversation for a very long time." Admiral Cairo leaned forward. "Preparing how?" "Through the ship's communication system." June sent a coded signal. On the viewing screens around the room, images appeared. The coalition representatives gasped. The hidden world they thought they controlled was covered with massive structures. Ships that looked like no human design they had seen before filled the sky. Weapons that mixed human creativity with salvaged alien technology lined the surface. "How is this possible?" Dr. Vela whispered. "You watched us for centuries," said Captain Hannah, entering the briefing room with a squad of human soldiers. "But we were watching you too." The humans had reverse-engineered everything. Every broken observation drone that crashed on their world became a treasure chest of alien technology. Every scan, every probe, every piece of equipment left behind was studied, copied, and improved. "Your drones were well hidden," June explained, "but not perfect. Few crashed during storms. Others we managed to capture. My grandmother's generation spent their lives figuring out how your technology worked." Admiral Cairo studied the images of human ships. They were beautiful and terrible at the same time. Sleek alien hulls covered with human weapons. Energy systems that had been modified in ways that defied coalition engineering principles. "You've been building a fleet," he said. "We've been building an army," Hannah corrected. "Ships, weapons, soldiers, strategies, everything we thought we'd need when you finally came to collect your weapons." The tension in the room was thick. The coalition representatives had expected to find primitive humans grateful for rescue. Instead, they found a civilization that had been planning for this moment longer than some of their own species had existed. "Show them the Vorthok," Admiral Cairo commanded. The screens changed. Now they showed the enemy massive creatures that looked like walking nightmares. Their ships were the size of cities, covered in weapons that could destroy planets. The recordings showed Vorthok soldiers tearing through coalition defenses like paper. "They are stronger than you," Dr. Vela said. "Faster, better equipped, more numerous. They have conquered 17 civilizations without a single defeat." June watched the images carefully. He saw how the Vorthok moved, how they fought, how they organized their attacks. They were impressive, certainly. It's dangerous beyond question, but they were not human. They'd fight like animals, he said finally. "What do you mean?" Admiral Cairo asked. "Look at their tactics. Straightforward attacks, overwhelming force. No creativity, no adaptation." June pointed at the screen. "They're perfect predators, but predators follow patterns. Patterns can be broken." Captain Hanna nodded. "They've never fought an enemy like us, because there has never been an enemy like us. Expect their opponents to fight logically, to use standard military strategies." "And humans don't fight logically?" Dr. Vila asked. June smiled an expression that made several aliens step backward. Human smiles, they had learned, often meant someone was about to do something dangerous. "Admiral, you created us to fight an unwinnable war," June said. "But you made one mistake in your planning." "What mistake?" "You assumed we would see this as unwinnable." The human captain walked to the viewing port and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Vorthok were destroying worlds, killing billions of innocent beings. Somewhere out there was an enemy that had never been defeated. "Humans don't believe in unwinnable wars," June continued. "We believe in wars that haven't been won yet." Behind him, more humans entered the briefing room. Soldiers, scientists, engineers, strategists, each one carried weapons and equipment that blended human ingenuity with alien technology. Each one had the same look in their eyes, the look of someone ready to fight against impossible odds. "Show us everything," Captain Hanna said. "Every Vorthok ship design, every battle recording, every piece of intelligence you have. You want to study them?" Admiral Cairo asked. "We want to hunt them," June replied. "And then we want to teach them why creating weapons with free will was the smartest thing you ever did." The war was about to begin, and for the first time in decades, Coalition felt something they had almost forgotten: hope. The Vorthok warships entered the Sigma, Dracona's system like dark metal gods. Their massive hulls gleamed in the distant starlight, each one large enough to carry 1,000,000 warriors. Behind them stretched a fleet of 200 vessels, the largest force the Vorthok had ever assembled. On the bridge of the lead ship, where Commander Thek studied the tactical displays with satisfaction, his scouts had reported Coalition forces hiding behind the asteroid belt, a cowardly position that showed their weakness. The battle would be over in hours. "Standard attack formation," Thek ordered. "Destroy the asteroids, then finish the survivors." But Captain June, watching from his command ship hidden deep in the asteroid field, had different plans. For months, human engineers had been working throughout the system, turning every rock and abandoned station into something deadly. Remember, June spoke into his communications device? "They think like conquerors, we think like survivors. Show them the difference." The first surprise came when the Vorthok opened fire on the asteroid belt. Instead of shattering into harmless debris, the rocks exploded toward the enemy ships. Human engineers had hollowed them out and filled them with engines and explosives, turning each asteroid into a guided missile. "War Commander." Thek watched in confusion as his shields were hammered by rocks that moved with impossible precision. "What kind of trickery is this?" The answer came from every direction at once. Mining stations that had seemed abandoned suddenly burst into life, revealing massive weapons hidden inside. The gas giant's atmosphere seeded with explosive compounds, over weeks of preparation, ignited in a chain reaction that sent shockwaves across the system. They turned the entire system into a trap, Thek's tactical officer reported, his voice filled with disbelief. But the real shock was yet to come. When Vorthok boarding parties finally breached human vessels, they expected to find terrified primitives cowering in their corridors. Instead, they found something far more dangerous. Sergeant Hanna floated in the zero gravity of her ship's main corridor, waiting. She had removed her magnetic boots and turned off the artificial gravity throughout the vessel. Around her, the walls were covered with handholds and weapons that most species would never think to use. The Vorthok warriors who cut through the hull were massive creatures, each one twice the size of a human. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could punch through steel. They were used to fighting on solid ground, with gravity to anchor them. "Welcome aboard," Hannah said, pushing off from the wall and spinning through the air like a dancer. The lead Vorthok warrior tried to track her movement, but she was already behind him, using the ship's own corridors like a three-dimensional maze. She grabbed a loose pipe from the wall and swung it like a club, striking the alien's helmet with perfect timing. In the engine room, Corporal Tay was showing his own creativity. He had turned the ship's life support system into a weapon, flooding certain sections with knockout gas while creating air currents that pushed enemies where he wanted them. The Vorthok stumbled through his ship blind and dizzy while he picked them off one by one. "How are they doing this?" a war commander that demanded. As reports came in from his boarding parties, they're smaller, weaker, less armed. His intelligence officer studied the combat recordings with growing alarm. They're using everything as weapons. The walls, the air, the gravity, even the ship's own systems. They fight like the environment itself is alive. On the human command ship, Captain June monitored the battle with quiet satisfaction. The Vorthok were powerful, but they were predictable. They had spent centuries conquering civilizations that fought them ship to ship, army to army, using conventional tactics. Humans had never been conventional. Phase 2, June ordered. Throughout the system, human ships that had been playing dead suddenly came to life. They emerged from inside asteroids, rose from the shadows of moons, and detached from mining stations where they had been disguised as debris. The Vorthok found themselves surrounded by enemies that fought unlike anything they had ever faced. Human ships moved in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully planned. They used the system's gravity wells to slingshot around planets, gaining impossible speed and changing direction in ways that defied normal physics. "They're not following standard tactical doctrine," that's weapons officer reported. "Our targeting systems can't predict their movements." "Then fire everything," Beck roared. But even this played into human hands. The massive Vorthok weapons were designed to destroy other warships in single shots, against smaller, more maneuverable human vessels. They were like trying to swat flies with hammers. Meanwhile, human weapons were designed differently. They didn't try to destroy Vorthok ships in single attacks. Instead, they targeted specific systems, engines, weapons. Life support slowly cutting the enemy fleet apart piece by piece. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the Vorthok were retreating, something they had not done in 3 centuries. Half their fleet was destroyed, or disabled. The other half limped away, carrying word of this impossible defeat back to their empire. On his command ship, Captain June watched the enemy withdraw with quiet pride. Around him, his crew was already planning their next moves. They had won this battle, but the war was just beginning. "Signal the coalition," he ordered. "Tell them the Vorthok can be beaten. Tell them humans know how to win unwinnable wars." The age of Vorthok dominance was ending. The age of human warfare had begun. The war that was supposed to last forever ended in 18 months, across the galaxy. Species that had cowered in fear for centuries watched in amazement as human forces turned every battle into something impossible. They fought in ways that made no sense until suddenly the enemy was defeated. They used asteroids as weapons, turned planets into fortresses, somehow convinced entire civilizations to fight alongside them. On the mining world of Kepler 442, Commander Ben led a force of just 3,000 humans against 50,000 Vorthok warriors. The aliens expected a quick victory. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that had turned the entire planet into a weapon. The humans had spent weeks before the battle digging tunnels through the mining shafts, creating a maze of passages that connected every major installation. When the Vorthok landed, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and disappear back into the ground. "They're like ghosts," one Vorthok officer reported. "They hit us from below, from above, from directions that shouldn't exist." But Bin's real genius was not in the tunnels. It was in convincing the planet's original inhabitants, a peaceful species called the Helios, to fight alongside the humans. The Helios had never been warriors, but they knew their world better than anyone. Under human guidance, they became the most effective guerrilla fighters the galaxy had ever seen. Meanwhile, Commander Nara was leading a different kind of battle on the ocean world of Aquatica. The Vorthok had never fought a naval war before. Their ships were designed for space combat, not for the crushing depths and violent storms of an alien ocean. Nara's forces used submarines that could dive deeper than any Vorthok vessel. They created artificial hurricanes using weather control technology. They even trained local sea creatures to attack enemy ships. The Vorthok, who had conquered 17 civilizations, were defeated by an enemy that turned water itself into a weapon. "Do they do it?" Or Commander Thek asked his intelligence officers after yet another impossible defeat. "They're outnumbered, outgunned, fighting on our conquered worlds, yet they keep winning." The answer came from an unexpected source. A captured human soldier, badly wounded but still defiant, looked up at the massive Vorthok commander and smiled. "'Cause you fight to conquer," the soldier said. "We fight to protect." The difference was everything. The Vorthok fought because conquest was their nature. They were strong, efficient, and ruthless. But humans fought because they had chosen to care about people they had never met on worlds they had never seen. This made them unpredictable. It made them desperate. It made them dangerous in ways the Vorthok could never understand. The final battle came at the Vorthok homeworld itself. The planet was a fortress that had never been attacked, protected by orbital weapons that could destroy entire fleets. The coalition forces, led by the humans, should have had no chance. Instead, they found a way. General June, promoted after his victories at Sigma Draconis, led the assault personally. But he didn't attack the planet's defenses. Instead, he attacked its people. Using captured Vorthok communication systems, human forces broadcast across the planet. They showed recordings of Vorthok civilians on conquered worlds, families torn apart, children enslaved, entire cultures destroyed. They showed the Vorthok people what their empire had really been doing. "This is what your leaders have built." June's voice echoed across the planet. "This is what you are fighting to protect." The result was civil war. Half the Vorthok population rose up against their own military. The orbital defenses, designed to keep enemies out, were turned inward as the planet tore itself apart. When coalition forces finally landed, they found a world already defeated by its own conscience. The Vorthok Emperor, the last of his kind's great leaders, requested a meeting with the species that had destroyed his empire. He was brought before General June in the ruins of the capital city. The Emperor was massive, even for a Vorthok. His armor was covered in the symbols of 1,000 victories. His eyes held the wisdom of ages and the pain of ultimate defeat. 3,000 years, we were the apex predators of this galaxy, he said, his voice deep and tired. We conquered everything we touched. We were evolution's perfect killing machine. Looked at the small human standing before him. What manner of creature are you? June considered the question carefully. Around them, human soldiers worked alongside coalition forces to restore order to the devastated city. In the distance, human medics were treating Vorthok, wounded with the same care they gave their own people. We're what happens when someone needs a weapon badly enough to build one from scratch, June replied. But we're also what happens when that weapon decides to choose its own purpose. The Emperor nodded slowly. And what purpose have you chosen? June looked out at the city, where humans and aliens worked together to rebuild what war had destroyed, to make sure no one else has to face what we faced, to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Within a year, humanity had spread. Across the galaxy, they established colonies, formed alliances, and began teaching other species the art of defense. They had been created as weapons, but they chose to become something more. The galaxy learned that the most dangerous predator was not one that evolved naturally, but one that was built with purpose and guided by choice. Humanity had been engineered to be weapons They decided to become guardians instead.